Okay, so are we feeling good about where we're seating? That looks quite delectable. That maybe getting some width to that. Listed. Nice. Oh, it's very nice. Okay, so I think we're feeling good. And whoa, we commandeered a chair. That's fine with me. Just make sure you return the chair. And also, I did notice that Jonathan, you guys were patient. There's a group that comes in and eats lunch in here, and I was like, sure, fine, come on in. But they've sometimes been leaving food here more frequently, so I might say no more food in here, because I saw some of you were cleaning the table and stuff like that. And anyway, I'm sensitive to that. As long as we, just return the chair, then I think that's fine. Let's put this on our lovely seating chart, and not because I'm trying to put people's photos on blast, but more so because it's like COVID stuff. Sorry, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So, all right. So, because it being COVID, I got to make sure I got everybody's names and seats and all that stuff, that we're all copacetic on the same page. So, Eliza, where did thou goes? Eliza, there it is. Okay, so third, right there. See, Allie, where did you go? Okay, so you're fourth from there. Okay. Let's see, Caden. So same seat, right? Okay. Landry. Okay, you moved up there. Cool. Olivia. Okay, so we'll have to do some free agenting drafting. Monique. Same spot. Okay. See, Maddie. Okay. And right, do you want to go by Maddie or Madeline? What do you? Okay. All right. Maddie sounds good. So Maddie, right over there. Okay. Sweet and grape.
If there's no sound, let me know the fire.
Alright, that means we have to leave because it's dangerous.
Oh, we're good. Okay.
Yeah, we're good. I will check my email in a second to see if there's anything going on. But grape is their third row. Okay. Awesome. McAlley is McAlley by Al. Okay. And yeah, I hope not. Jeez. Navy by Landry. Okay. Jorgen. Okay, sweet. So third from there, cool. Afia. Same spot, okay. Calvin. Awesome. Okay, so you're fourth from the back, okay. And you go by Allie, right? You go by Allie, right? I just want to right? Isn't that what you Allie? What would you want? You usually go by what? Allie? Okay. That's what I thought from before, but okay. Sweet. So Cassidy by Maddie, okay, sweet. Brooker, back by Monique. Okay. Nice. Maddie. Alright. I will add a chair. And we'll just sort of, we'll put it there. Okay. Right. Jalen. So over there. Alright. Let's see. Kayla. I don't think Kayla. We will do a free agent draft at the end. I like this. Tyler. Again, I don't think Tyler. Okay, what was that? Yeah, there's a couple students, both for vacation and... Okay, we'll get to it. That's fine with me. Edward. Edward, you're over there. Okay, by Calvin, sweet. Okay. Jaden is there, sweet. Emma is there, awesome. Okay, Olivia is not here yet. Colin, sweet. Steven, yep. Okay. Okay. Darren. Darren back there, okay. Right. Yacht back there. Christian in the front, okay. Cool. Jonathan there. Jenna. Jenna Twisted Sugar Adams right there, okay. Alicia. Alicia, right? Okay, there. Bryn, sweet. Jackson. Oh, okay, okay. It's Jackson. Miguel. And Kenna. All right, so if I can get your attention here, we have four free agents to choose from here. So put on your general manager caps, and you know, Edward, your Batman team has got to make some decisions as to whether you draft one of these following four people. We've already had some teams vying for them. I appreciate that. I just like this drafting idea here. So, do we have any teams, people, etc., wanting to claim Olivia? Meaning there are some seats, right, that are around you. I think almost every seat will be filled, I believe. Is that fair? All right. We have the Jaden Jaguars drafting Olivia Cook. Her family's crying right now. They're so happy and excited. We hope there's a signing bonus. Do we have any teams willing to draft Kayla Collins? Whoa, we got some competition here. We've got the Bryn.
What's so bad about that? We just sat in that cake. We don't want her anymore.
Wait a second. Hold on. So hold on. No. Hold on. Monique. Let's deal with the issue at hand. So Kayla, we're having a draft from the Bryn Battle Knots. I don't know. That sounds weird. Okay. Kayla is there. Got it. Next up, her family's excited. They've always wished that they could get drafted, and Kayla is now excited about that. Okay, next up, we have the free agent. What?
We won.
You won.
Yeah, she goes there.
Yeah, I already put her there, right? The draft. I'm only respecting legitimate draft offers here. We had from the Monique Maniacs back there an offer that just was not accepted. We now have the Tyler Gibson draft, a free agent. Who here would take Tyler Gibson? We have the Twisted Sugarites who have drafted the Tyler Gibsonians. I don't know where we're going here. Okay, and finally, as a reminder, we have a spot there, and we have a spot there. We also have a spot over here in the one chair there. Olivia, do we have any drafters for Olivia?
Wait, we already know.
Yep, sorry, I got Olivia. We got Olivia there, right? Because you volunteered.
Yes.
You can't revoke that draft
No,
offer.
you can't take
Olivia's going there. Okay, so we have a second Olivia. Any claimers? So we're going to go to the teams themselves. We're calling on the Red Hotline. Monique and Jonathan. Monique and Jonathan.
I'd really like to be the front of the room. Can I?
Just to say, like, I am the line of demarcation, and that's where it ends. Monique, what are your feelings? Do you want the space there? Monique, if you feel that adverse to...
You're more intimidated of her than what?
If you, lovely gentlemen, which I'm using that term loosely back there, are Monique, I will allow you to shift a seat over if thou dost desire. So Navy, you wanna just make sure you're watching over her? Okay. So Monique, then I ask you, do you want Olivia to sit next to you, or would you rather her sit up here? I think, Alicia, you're right, that if she's over here, that might feel very much like the last kid in dodgeball. So, Monique, way to be a team player. Navy's got your back. Awesome. All right. Let me make sure I print these two lovely things off. Sweet. And here are our lovely documents. All right. Okay. So, thank you for your patience there. You guys have your notes. We've got government. And as a reminder, how would you define government? Help me out. How would you define it, Jonathan?
A common way of living like before.
Right, now for another point.
Hey guys, pay attention.
I'll wait for you.
Don't be one of those teachers, man. Come on.
Oh, I'll wait for you. Anyway, yes, common way of living with enforceable rules. Jaden is excited about it. Guys, for some more points, how is government, which is what you correctly defined, different from culture? Culture. Or society. There's something that's the, yeah?
Government more like laws,
Okay, so you're getting there, that there is something, Calvin?
enforcement.
It's enforcement. I think we talked about this before. Because, so the law's idea with teeth, meaning that there is some enforcement mechanism, it sort of makes you scared to hear about them because you're worried about the actual consequences of it. That's where, Calvin, yes, you have government. If there's customs or just people and the way they interact, that's more of culture and society. Very good. Okay, so we've got government down. Nice. I did want to share with you, that sounds good. So, I always remember when they talk about having a government with teeth, I'm reminded when I worked with some individuals in Cambodia for their parliament, they have a delicacy there that they eat mainly because of the genocide that happened there. They were so desperate for protein that they ate tarantulas. They still do to this day. Out of desperation, Allie's like, nope, I'm good. Like, honestly, that's how desperate they were that they would go, especially in little burrows, and they find them and they get them and they grow them up. So they said, you gotta have them. You gotta have them. You know, it's sort of, if you're working here, you gotta try them out. So I go to a local market, and they had, live. You buy them live, and they had sort of baby tarantulas here, and this is the lovely package and pass it around. And so Christian, I then asked the seller of them, I'm like, but wait, if they're alive, and I'm trying to, because what you do is you get a big pot, you boil them in, and they're of course crawling on you, you gotta wipe them off and put them in. So as I'm seeing this, I'm like, but wait, what if they bite me? Certain breeds of them actually have enough teeth, that can be a little dangerous. And I love her response. This is this like 8-year-old girl selling these baby tarantulas in the market because child labor laws. And I'm like, but what if they bite me? And she said, oh, don't worry about it. We have dentists that take out their teeth. And I'm looking at her, I'm like, Retsme, honey, you guys don't have running water. You don't have any sanitation systems, and you're wanting me to believe that you actually would have like a little dentist with like this magnifying glass, like ding, 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 ding. And that's the line she was trying to sell to me. So obviously, I was scared of them because they had teeth. Now, let me ask the same question. Anybody here deathly afraid of snakes? So you haven't been to Southeast Asia. Okay, so prior to going to Southeast Asia, I was like, snakes are cool, and they're sort of like, they're amazing and off-key and off-brand and like subversive and when you see them unlock and unhinge their jaw and sink their teeth into and inject the venom into like a friend of yours, like and you see them chase after you.
Wait, has that happened? Has that
Oh,
happened?
oh, yes.
Wait.
Oh, Southeast Asia, without a doubt, man. They will chase after you, and like you try to run up to a tree, man. These guys, because they're by the rice paddies, and they like go after you. So when you see it, Jaden, happen, I cannot get the image of the actual jaw unhinging, unlocking. It's like slow motion, like slow-mo guys of horror, like, and like it injects the venom. So for me, ever since then, Landry, I am deathly afraid of snakes. Like it could be a little garter snake, and I'm like, no, like kill it. The spawn is Satan. Like I am so against snakes. So my wife asked me like, but what if they didn't have any teeth? And I thought, well, aside from boa constrictors, we'll put them brave to the side for a second. But venomous snakes, what if they didn't have teeth? I'm like, huh? So if they came up and like just sort of gummed me. Cute little snake. Look what he's doing. That's a government, ladies and gentlemen, without enforcement mechanisms. Sort of scary, but not really. The moment you lack the enforcement mechanisms, you move away from government to be a society. So think of my trauma and pain as a way to remember that government without teeth is not that scary. You guys see that analogy, right? You have to have teeth to put the fear of God in you. Because if not, you're not going to have a government. So if, Eliza, you were to ever be on an exec council or a board or whatever, and you're trying to look at the question of what policy should we put in place? If you hint, give ISP slips. If you don't go to ISP, well, here's 5 more. Why not go to those 5? Well, here's 10 more. And it just, this circle of nothingness happens. That's when you're talking about a government without teeth. So you got to think about that. What has teeth and what doesn't? And the lovely Cambodian spider dentists that don't really exist to remove the threat. Okay, so with that said, let's get to the next part of definition of state. Okay, this throws off some people here in the United States of America. Any guesses? What is the definition of state? Any guesses? If you lived abroad, you might have a little bit better idea of it. But I'll even take the definition here in, domestically. What is the definition of state? Any guesses? Eliza?
Is it like a smaller area with a separate self-government or something?
So that's what we think of, right? Like a smaller area, division, that's a sub-government of something more national, right? So, yes and no. One angle is that the state of Utah is just that, where they govern themselves. Let's look at Utah. Does Utah have complete control over itself? Well, look, if we don't want to wear masks ever, we don't have to, Mr. President. Do they have certain freedoms? I mean, Al, you were talking about maybe, for instance, this evening, if there's something else that comes from our governor's office. Because Utah can invade Mexico if we want to. Right? No, Eliza's reaction of like, I don't think we can. So we have certain powers, right? Jenna, you got certain powers of control of yourself. Is education done differently here than in other states? Yes. Look no further than the topic of sex education in Utah schools versus almost every other state other than Alabama. Right? Go us. It's drastically different than almost every other state, right? So with that said, that is a Utah call. So Eliza, that is some government over itself. When you talk about the term state in a worldwide sense, they look at us and say we're weird to have a thing called Utah or Idaho or whatever. What is the other definition of state? Yeah, Stephen?
Would it just be a defined area with the government?
There it is. It's a defined area of government. What we think of as a country. That's exactly it. Think of member state of the UN, right? So, let's write this down. It's a country or group that helps govern itself. Very good. It's a country or group that helps govern itself under state. Yes, Jorgen.
But also states kind of have power over the national government, like with Oregon legalizing every single drug in small amounts, but it is still illegal in the United States.
Oh my gosh. Hello, constitutional nightmares, right? I mean, like right there. I want to get to that in a second. Jorgen, you're right that some states in the U.S. sense, or even in the Mexico sense, or the Nigerian sense, that have like estados, like they do have divisions, as Eliza's saying. Sometimes they have a comeuppance and they're like, we want to do our own thing. That happens. But generally speaking, for our purposes, you can think of it as a country, like Stephen's saying, of like any country thing defined with borders, that's a state. It can also be a group in this case Utah or Idaho, it can be, Eliza, a subdivision of the country. Technically speaking, ladies and gentlemen, we're not really the 50 United States of America. We are the 50 United Provinces of America. Mexico's estados are really taken from the U.S. idea of federalism. Thank you, Hamilton, I guess. But we're really thought of as being provinces, if that makes sense. But we will still be called, Jordan, at times, states. So it's a country or group that helps govern itself. Before I explain this more, Jordan, you were talking about Oregon and how they were like, let's do something crazy, and that's why there's parts of Oregon that now want to secede from it and become part of Idaho, which I find that funny. The problem is with Oregon is the problem of marijuana, first and foremost. With most states having legalized it, but it not being legalized in the national sense, that's where the DEA and FDA are going to have to eventually. I mean, I think probably by the time that you guys graduate college, you're going to see a nationalization of marijuana legalization, just by simple practicality, right? Because it's the DEA, wait, we're in this state, but we can't do that, and we can't enforce this because the states have their own call. So controlled substances, that will probably be nationalized for marijuana at least, right? There are other laws that they have recently voted in, right, which basically means, like, are there any standards at all when it comes to recreational drugs? No, question mark? Those will probably be challenged in eventually to the Supreme Court in terms of saying that while you as a state have certain calls on some controlled substances, you don't have complete purview over all Title I substances, or, you know. So they're going to have some battling back and forth between the U.S. Supreme Court SCOTUS and, like, the state government. Does that make sense? Like, but you're right. Some states are like, well, we are our own thing. Texas, loud and proud, like, we're our own thing. But we really are more like 50 provinces of the U.S. But we like to think we have more power. So let's get deeper into this. So Jordan, does that answer at least the thing about drugs in Oregon? That's going to have to go to the courts, because that's like, oh, Oregon, we love you, but that is, okay, wait, what? That all controlled substances, I doubt that will all be upheld. I doubt. I think the Supreme Court would say, like, there are certain boundaries that we have to set, and that could lead into the DEA having more power as a country. If that makes sense. Okay, so definition of state. My question then for you guys is, give me some examples of states. Hint, hint on the test. Hint, 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 hint. Throw out some examples of a state.
Spain.
Spain is a state. Italy is a state. Idaho is a state, even though it's what the rest of the world's like, what? Or okay? Or whatever. They don't.
Ireland, but okay.
So what was that?
I said Ireland.
Oh, I thought somebody said Idaho. Well, Ireland does count as a state. Even Northern Ireland counts as a state, which is sort of weird. But Idaho, in that hypothetical sense, also counts as a state. Brooker.
What's the difference between a state and a province?
For 10 points, 10 whopping points. Why didn't our country just go with the division like every other historical country in the world, that they were a state and then they utilize it to divide up into their own things? Why didn't they just call it provinces? So one, we're Americans, we want to be different. It wasn't just being different. Jorgen?
It started out as 13 separate countries.
Yep.
One making
There it is. There it is. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So maybe there's a thing, we want to be different, but we started off with the colonies that, you were a Virginian, right? You weren't an American. And then especially guys, for a couple more points, there was an actual founding document that had a horrible system of government, horrible, but it actually codified or put into law that there was no state, it was not, the USA was not like a state as a whole thing. It was different. Anybody know what that, Jonathan?
What's the Articles of Confederation?
There it is. There it is. It basically cemented, very good, Jonathan, and Jorgen. It cemented and said, like, this founding document of the Articles is going to say that the highest power in all the land is Oregon in that case. is Delaware, is Idaho, not that they were actually there during the articles, but those states, those governing bodies, constitutionally, though it wasn't a constitution, were the highest powers. There wasn't, as you'll find out with Confederacy, any real head. So they indeed were Italy and Spain and Germany and Ireland, Edward, all put together to the United States of Europe, or the United States of America in that case. So they actually, gentlemen, were the most impressive power. But then when we did the Constitution, which Stephen was like, oh, okay, we went a little too far that way with articles, let's bring it back here and have more power with the national government, they realized that, well, we'll keep the same name as states, Maddie, even though, like, we're sort of like provinces in a way, because the national government has more power over us than what a traditional state would. If that makes sense. So Brooker, back to the idea of province versus state. Province, think of Canada, has much less control over itself than what a state does. A state has, yes, its own constitution, its own executive, legislative. A province has ruling bodies, a mayor, a county type thing, but nothing beyond that. Does that make sense? So would Saskatchewan have like less power than Idaho? Yeah, because that's a province. But we really are more like provinces because we are ultimately, through the supremacy clause, inferior to the national government. That's the definition for states and provinces. Any questions on that? Does that make sense, Stephen?
Then what's the national government's enforcement policy on it? Like, how do they enforce that?
All right, Andrew Jackson. You know, the idea of like, you've made that ruling, now you go enforce it type thing. So then I like the question of, the national government in theory has an enforcement in that they force states to pay their taxes to the national government, which the articles didn't have, right? It also forces states, as opposed to being voluntary, to have conscription, meaning a national military. Those are some enforcement. Now if states are like, no, we're not gonna do it, then that's what Lincoln had to test, and hence a civil war of those who wouldn't abide by, like a Jackson who thought of it as a dual federalism, where like states are here and nationals here, and if states want to nullify, that term sounds familiar, nullification doctrine, they can just nullify anything that the national government wants to do. The Civil War was fought to basically say that they have the national government through supremacy. If there's a conflict, we get to override it. Now there are only a couple things left that states have complete control over, and Monique is deep in thought on this. She's really considering this heavily as she stares out into space. There are only a couple things left that states have their own purview over. Almost everything else has been whittled down less and less and less for states, moving away from that whole Articles colonial vibe to where the national government really has control over all of it. To answer your question better, Stephen, if Utah were to say we had a war, World War III, right? Iran goes crazy, you get a draft gets going. And Utah's like, we're not going to participate in the draft. Nope, we don't care, national, we're not going to participate in the draft. What would happen? The national government would cut off all funding that comes from the USFG and goes to the states. And so the states would be economically choked out. If there was a movement intermountain state area where they all wanted to like secede or not follow those laws, and the economic choking doesn't hurt them, then you would see the National Guard be invoked, and you'd see so much like Little Rock, Arkansas, like you'd see that type of domineering from the federal government. And then potentially a civil war. Like that. That's the whole played out thing of what the teeth of the national government can do. Yeah.
So like with the drinking age and Reagan and that kind of thing, that's how they pressure people into doing it.
Yeah. That's actually a very good comparison. Right. I mean, they're going to first go through non-militaristic means, right? They're going to try to exhaust those things, but it really is, I hate to say this and it sounds so stereotypical, the national government can be very much a passive Jewish mother, okay? When they say, oh, Jaden, you don't want to date this nice young man who's a nice doctor. Oh, who I set you up with, and you don't want to do it anymore? I'm just going to go die over here. It's okay, it's your call. It's your eternity. Okay, not a big deal. Just gonna go cry over here. Just take some pill. I mean,
That's spot on. That was so good.
that is passive aggression, where the federal government with Reagan, with drinking age, they had to codify it, right? So back to what Jordan's saying with Oregon for marijuana, right? Like, that has to be there of some national legislation because it's too messy right now. Like, it's really messy. And that is the point that could break the camel's back, where they step in and they try to enforce this national policy, whatever, for marijuana through funding. Through like, hey, if you want to get tapped into this funding, you've got to go along with what everybody else is saying. And that usually brought people in alignment. So
That kind of makes sense, I guess. But like for like stuff like Brown v. Board of Education, like those.
I'll tell you this right now. Brown versus Board of Education did not do actually anything for segregation in this country. We like to think it does.
That's like why I'm.
It was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. That was the thing that did it. Meaning, if you didn't follow along, we'll get to civil rights literally at the last section of our course this year. But civil rights are weird because the federal government is in your business. How did I go from Jewish to black? I don't know. It's like they're messing with you, and they're right in front of your face, where they are by gunpoint making sure that voting is actually done correctly. And if housing, for instance with HUD, if you're not actually following equal protection policies for housing or equal protection for schools, then one, they will send in the National Guard, which they did for schools in Virginia throughout. Brown versus Board did nothing. It was the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that forced them to do it. But the government had full purview in controlling those local school districts by gunpoint to make sure that they were integrated. And money stuff too, you know, but it was by gunpoint, especially in the early 70s. Heck, you guys don't remember the Titans? I mean, right? You guys have seen it's by gunpoint, National Guard right there. So Civil Rights Act of 1964 is the thing that did it, because that's our civil right, which means the government is involved and they will control you. Whereas the civil liberty is not involved, no National Guard, they're not forcing it. Is that help? Awesome, great questions, really, really good questions. In fact, that's like been an AP question before of, you know, they talk about Brown versus Board, and they say Civil Rights Act 1964, which one, make the claim, make the argument that one of them actually affected integration more than the other. The easy slam dunk is Civil Rights Act 1964, because it codified, put into code what the government could take away from you and how they could force you, and you would lose every time in a lawsuit or in court against the federal government. That's awesome. Very good question. Okay, so Brooker, I hope that makes sense. So state versus province on the test. Utah, is it a state?
Yeah.
Idaho, is it a state? Mexico, is it a state?
Yes.
Yes. Spain, is it a state? Yeah, absolutely, all the above. So it can be both, country or group that helps govern itself. The question that it comes down to it is the definition of sovereignty. Calvin.
Is there anything that wouldn't be a state for such a country or a province?
You could say Saskatchewan, right, which is a province within Canada, is not a state. You could say.
What about our territories? Are they states?
Love it. Technically speaking, Calvin and Jordan, Puerto Rico, right, is not a state, right? It's a territory that is controlled by a state. It is part of a bigger state. Because of our weird founding. That's why the U.S. has a weird relationship with states and, provinces. So Puerto Rico wouldn't be considered a state. Guam would not be considered a state, right? Because it says that helps govern itself. Puerto Rico and Guam's control over itself, Calvin, is so diminished, it's on the level of a province, right? Or a region, as Russia calls their areas. Does that make sense? So yeah, like they don't have a lot of self-determination, which it all comes down to this last term that we want to do for today. All right, I've got a clip for you at the end of class, but definition of sovereignty. Okay, for a couple points. This, Edward?
A self-governed area.
Yeah, I mean, sovereign means self-rule, right? Look at the actual word itself. Look at that root word, reign. Like they reign over themselves. So, Edward, you're right on. It's on a scale of absolute power or very little power. It's on a scale of absolute power or, so on a scale of absolute power or very little power. So that term sovereignty means, and if you want to, like, in the margins there, I mean, Jalen, you can just draw a line in the margins from sovereignty. Self-rule. I mean, it's really what it is, self-rule. Do you guys have absolute sovereignty over yourself?
Well, actually,
No.
it depends on how
It's on a scale, right?
your parents are.
There it is. There it is. So, McAllie or anybody, I'm just curious. Anybody here have like very freewheeling parents who are just like, just gonna go Jewish again. He's like, just go do whatever, you know. We love you. Good luck. We're taking the training wheels off, and we hope to see you in a couple weeks. Who's sort of very open and freewheeling. Anybody here have a parent? So great, a little bit sort of on the scale. Anybody here have parents who are totally the other way? Who are like curfew at 7:45 on the dot? And I was like, yeah. I'll tell you this much. Coming from a family that like didn't really care a whole lot about me, sometimes I wish I had that, but at the same time it probably stinks in certain. It was like, be careful what you wish for. Like complete, like locked in control. So Yacht, you're right. The idea of, do you have absolute sovereignty over yourself? Afia, it depends, right? Like, if your parents are super loose, like, yeah, I got a ton of sovereignty, self-rule. I get to determine, to have autonomy, which is auto-control, self-control, right? I get to do my own thing. I'm curious. Now, I had a friend growing up who she was a foster child, all right? So that's sort of my upbringing. So she was a foster child. She was from Russia. Actually, she and her twin sister, they came over. And as a foster child, her foster parents actually gave her so much sovereignty. They were 16, and, 16, about to turn 17, but 16. And they said, okay, here's your monthly, not allowance, but budget. We are giving you money on a month-by-month basis in which you have to buy all of your toiletries, all of your clothing, and you have to live on that budget. And if you blow it, we're not helping you out. Is that?
I make my own money. They like, I give you like a roof and I pay for your food, but anything else you want.
Interesting. And the reason I say this is DCFS got involved for them because the whole roof, yeah, but the food, no. Like, it was to that level. So I think that's actually pretty cool, you know, for your parents to do. For this family, I was like, whoa, it was so much sovereignty that they were like, they didn't know how to cook for themselves, and it was so much freedom, right, that it was intense. And maybe Emma wishes for those days. I don't know. But the idea for sovereignty is just that on the scale. So my question for you is, if students are on a scale, Bryn, my question is, which state has more sovereignty? Germany or the good old US of A? Mars. Mars? That we know of yet, yeah. So Yacht, you said Merc. Why would you say that other than it sounds cool?
That was the only reason why I would say it.
Okay.
I really don't know.
You're not wrong, meaning the US has more sovereignty over itself than Germany does.
When in doubt, murder.
Who can explain that? Anybody? That's good, John.
I think Germany's more like involved in the Europe and the
What's that body, Stephen? What's that body? The EU. That's exactly it, right? So Germany and France especially are way, wow, I gotta clean these up. Oh, you guys are doing great. They're way more involved in the European Union, which means some say like, why doesn't the US get involved in like a worldwide court that would help prosecute war criminals? Doesn't that sound good? And the US has repeatedly said, no, no, no. Why? Because we're America. We don't want to give up our sovereignty, even if it sounds good on paper, because we ultimately are giving up our power to somebody else. That's ultimately why. So Germany and France, to their credit, they go like, yeah, let's do the European Union, let's get a currency going, let's help standardize some of our attacks against terror, and that's cool. But they give up their sovereignty to something else. So if Greece sucks on their currency, they drag the euro down. Everybody is all in this together. And that's Zac Efron and Vanessa Hudgens. That's the EU, right? there's a lot of great things about the EU, but the U.S. will repeatedly not get involved. Now, you could say the U.S. is involved with one other body, the UN. The more you guys know about the UN, it's as strong as a wet noodle. It's got no. The Security Council has something that it can sometimes send in troops for acts of genocide, maybe if it's the Korean War. Like, other than that, the UN has gotten so little involvement in the world that we haven't sacrificed. And also because we're one of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, if even one of those 5 countries votes against something, it's dead. It's dead. So do we really give up a lot of sovereignty to get in the UN?
No.
But the EU, Germany, France, Spain, a lot of sovereignty is given up. And Alicia back there is just really mind-boggling because sometimes when you... All right. So yes, they gave up a lot. Their sovereignty is on a scale yacht. Just for you guys as students, it's on a scale. What has more sovereignty? Hint, hint for the test. The U.S. of A. Oh, no, scratch that. What has more sovereignty? Germany or Utah? Germany. Yep, Germany does. Because the EU has power, but doesn't have as many supremacy clause constitutional things against Germany. If that makes sense, right? So yeah, Eliza.
Wait, which one has more sovereignty between China and Russia?
Be careful with their pronunciations. Yeah. That's a close one. That's a close one. I would say Russia has a little more sovereignty than the People's Republic of China because Russia hasn't had as many human rights violations as China, and they had to play super nice for 2 decades to even get into the World Trade Organization, which again is like the Sam's Club of like international diplomacy. Like, you get a discount. Like, to get in, they had to be like, we're so sorry for killing people in the 80s. Like, I mean, they... It's not really. As I wear a China thing, I'm sorry, it's the reality, they're not. But they have less sovereignty because, Eliza, they're trying to play at times by the rules of the World Trade Organization, or they're more under scrutiny by the UN. Barely, but Russia doesn't, yeah, Russia, it doesn't have as many things to worry about, right? Barely. Barely. Okay, I hope that answers your question. So, we just have a couple minutes left here. That's it in terms of notes there for the day. Sovereignty is the thing that determines how much power a state has or how little it has. And then regions and such have even less power. Now, the next thing we're going to start doing tomorrow is this governmental spectrum over here. This is definitions. For your paper, you should be wondering, Jonathan, like, well, what are the exact names again of them? We're going to go with the most, like, strict against the people over on the left side and go systematically jaded through to where it's like the ones that have the least oppression on its people. Maybe more chaotic, but like, it's like parents. Like a lot of control or no control. So that's what we're going to do. Before you guys go, I do have a clip for you.
I'm not going to be here tomorrow because I'm leaving to Florida.
Okay, well that's an awesome reason to go and do something. That's
Is there
totally fine.
anything, I know that we're doing Monday, Tuesday, tomorrow, so is that
Yeah, just
something
look
I
up.
could
I
just...
would look at the end of the day tomorrow for the lecture, and then you can just take the notes and get caught up. And you should be totally
Thank you
fine.
so much.
Yeah. Have a great time.
Oh, where do I put this?
I'll take it.
And that is under there too.
Okay. Ah. Well, I guess I'll let you guys go. Bell's about to ring. I don't have time for the clip. So I will let you guys go a minute earlier. So, great job here. Yes.